My friend, there comes a time in every life when the weight of the world presses so heavily on your shoulders that you begin to wonder if you'll ever stand tall again. You wake up in the morning with questions that have no answers, tears that won't dry, and fears that seem louder than your faith. You try to plan, to control, to make sense of it all, yet the more you try, the more tangled it becomes. But there is a truth that has the power to steady your trembling heart. God is in control. No matter what chaos swirls around you, no matter what valley you're walking through right now, no matter how uncertain tomorrow looks, God has not stepped off his throne. The heavens are not panicking. The angels are not confused. The one who made the stars still holds the script of your life in his nail-scarred hands. When you understand that truth, something changes inside you. You begin to breathe again. You stop reacting to every storm and start resting in his sovereignty. You begin to act like everything works out, not because it looks like it, because you know who's in charge of it. You see, faith doesn't mean you won't have storms. Faith means you won't be shaken in them. Faith doesn't erase the pain, it redefines it. It says, this may hurt, but it's not the end. God's still writing. And sometimes you have to act like everything will work out, even when everything looks like it's falling apart, not because you're pretending, but because you're trusting. Let me tell you something powerful when you act like God is in control. Peace takes the place of panic. Your posture changes, your words change, your outlook changes. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start magnifying the one who already knows the outcome. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start saying, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? The Bible tells us, be still and know that I am God. Do you hear that? Be still. That doesn't mean do nothing. It means rest in the assurance that he's doing something. When you can't trace his hand, you can still trust his heart. There are some of you listening right now who've been praying for years for something to change. You've done all you can and you're tired. You've cried until you have no more tears left. You're wondering if God has forgotten your address. You're looking at the calendar thinking time is running out. But hear me today, God's timing is not late, it's perfect. He may not show up when you want him to, but he will always show up when it's right. You may not understand why you lost that job, why that relationship ended, why the door you prayed for slammed in your face. But maybe, just maybe, God is protecting you from something that would have destroyed you. Sometimes his greatest mercies are disguised as disappointments. Sometimes his no is not rejection, it's redirection. You see, when God closes a door, it's because he's opening one that leads to a higher floor. You don't have to understand the road to trust the destination. And if you believe that he is in control, you can act like it even in the waiting, even in the wondering, even in the weeping. The enemy wants you to panic. He wants you to live anxious, fearful, doubting the goodness of God. But child of God, lift your head. The same hands that shaped the mountains hold your future. He didn't bring you this far to abandon you now. Look back over your life for a moment. Think of all the times you thought it was over, and yet somehow you made it through. You didn't make it by your own strength. You made it because there was a God behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail, working all things together for your good. You didn't know it then, but he was guiding your steps through every detour, every disappointment, every delay. And if he was faithful then, he'll be faithful now. The God who parted the Red Sea hasn't lost his power. The same God who raised Lazarus from the dead hasn't stopped performing miracles. The same God who turned Joseph's pit into a palace still turns pain into purpose today. That's why you can act like everything works out, because it does. Maybe not the way you imagined, maybe not on your schedule, but always in the way that glorifies him and grows you. Faith isn't about faking a smile while your heart breaks. It's about saying, God, I don't understand this, but I trust you anyway. It's about walking through fire without losing your praise. It's about resting in the chaos and believing that even this, yes, even this, is under his control. There's a calm that comes when you truly believe God's in charge. You stop striving and start surrendering. You stop fighting for control you never had and start resting in the control he never lost. My friend, the devil doesn't fear your strength. He fears your surrender. He fears a believer who says, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. Because when you reach that place, you become untouchable. The storm may rage around you, but it can't shake the peace within you. Think of Daniel in the lion's den. The decree had been signed, the pit was waiting, yet Daniel didn't panic. He didn't argue. He didn't lose his faith. He knelt and prayed as he always did. Why? Because he knew something, that God was in control. And when they threw him into that den, the same God who made the lions open their mouths in silence. Think of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. For years he suffered. But one day he looked into the eyes of the very brothers who betrayed him and said, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. That's what happens when you trust the author. He rewrites what others tried to erase. And let's not forget Job, who lost everything, his family, his health, his wealth. Yet he declared, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Do you know what that is? That's faith in action. That's the power of a heart that believes God is still in control when life makes no sense. Some of you are going through something right now that feels unbearable. The nights are long and the mornings bring no relief. You've prayed and waited, and heaven seems silent. But let me remind you, silence doesn't mean absence. Just because you can't see God's hand doesn't mean he's not moving. He's working behind the curtain, setting up something far greater than you can see. You may not feel it, but your story is being redeemed as you speak. That heartbreak is being rewritten into healing. That setback is becoming a setup for your breakthrough. Don't give up. Don't walk away just because it's hard. Keep standing, keep believing, keep acting like everything will work out. Because the moment you do, you align your heart with heaven's truth. Faith pulls tomorrow's miracle into today's mindset. I know it's easy to say, trust God, when life is going well. But real trust is proven in the dark. It's when the bills are piling up. The doctor's report is bad, and the door you prayed for won't open. That's when faith is refined. That's when you discover that peace doesn't come from circumstances, but from confidence in the one who controls them. When you act like God is in control, you stop living by what you see and start living by what you know. You know he's faithful. You know he's good. You know he's never failed. You know that he takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it for good. So, my dear friend, lift your eyes. Stop staring at the storm and start looking at the Savior. Stop focusing on the problem and start magnifying the promise. Don't let fear drive your decisions. Let faith anchor your soul. There's a reason the Bible says, walk by faith, not by sight, because sight sees the storm, but faith sees the Savior walking on the waves. Sight sees the cross, but faith sees the resurrection. Sight sees the grave, but faith sees the glory. When you live like God is in control, you begin to carry peace into places that don't make sense. You can walk through valleys without fear because you know who walks beside you. You can face tomorrow without worry because you know who holds it. You can endure today's pain because you know it's producing tomorrow's purpose. Maybe you've been praying for a door to open and it hasn't. Maybe you've been asking for a mountain to move and it's still there. Maybe you've been pleading for an answer and all you hear is silence. Don't lose heart. God's delays are not denials. His silence is not his absence. He's preparing something greater than you could imagine. You might be asking, but how can I act like everything works out when everything looks wrong? My friend, that's what faith is. Trusting the unseen, believing beyond the evidence, standing on the promise when the proof hasn't shown up yet. Faith says, even when I don't feel it, he's working. Even when I don't see it, he's moving. Even when I don't understand it, he's still in control. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. The God who shaped galaxies has not turned his face from you. He knows your name, your tears, your pain, and he's holding it all in his hands. One day, you'll look back on this storm and realize it wasn't chaos. It was construction. God was building your faith, deepening your roots, preparing you for the very thing you prayed for. So hold on, keep walking, keep believing, keep acting like everything works out. Because it does. When God is in control, he's never once lost a battle. He's never been surprised. He's never looked down and said, I didn't see that coming. He's God, the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when you anchor your heart in that truth, you'll find peace that passes understanding, strength that never runs out, and hope that shines even in the darkest night. My friend, no matter what it looks like right now, no matter the storm, the loss, the delay, or the heartbreak, stand firm. Act like everything works out, because it will. Not because you said it, not because you planned it, but because He promised it. And He never breaks a promise. When you believe God is in control, peace replaces panic and faith becomes stronger than fear. There is a shift that happens deep within the human heart when a person finally lets go of the desperate need to understand and starts to simply trust. When you come to the realization that the same God who spoke the universe into existence is holding your life in His hands, something inside you begins to quiet down. The storms that once terrified you lose their power to dominate your emotions. The questions that once consumed your thoughts begin to fade into the background of a greater truth that you are not in charge, and that's the best news you could ever receive. The reason we lose peace so easily is because we keep trying to take God's place. We try to control what we were never meant to control, fix what only He can fix, and plan what only He can see. But faith whispers, let go. He's got this. When you finally believe that, panic loses its grip. Fear no longer calls the shots. You begin to walk differently, talk differently, live differently, because your soul is anchored in something greater than the chaos around you. There's a difference between believing in God and believing God is in control. One is a concept, the other is a conviction. It's easy to say you believe in God when life is smooth, when everything goes according to plan. But when the bottom falls out, when the doctor calls with bad news, when the job disappears, when your heart breaks and your dreams shatter, that's when your belief is tested. That's when you discover whether your faith is just a Sunday confession or a Monday conviction. Believing God is in control means you can face uncertainty with unshakable calm. It means that even when you don't know what's coming next, you trust that He does. It means you stop rehearsing your worries and start releasing them. You stop trying to predict outcomes and start praising the one who already holds them. Peace doesn't come from having a problem-free life. It comes from knowing you're held by a problem-solving God. The world teaches you to find peace in control, to manage your environment, to eliminate risk, to predict outcomes, to make everything line up according to your plan. But the gospel teaches you to find peace in surrender. The more you let go, the freer you become. The moment you stop fighting for control is the moment peace begins to flood in. Fear thrives where control lives. When you stop needing to control everything, fear loses its supply line. It has nothing left to feed on. Faith, on the other hand, grows when you release control. It stretches, it breathes, it deepens. It's as if the soul expands to hold more of God's peace every time you choose to trust Him instead of trying to manage what you can't. Think about a child in their father's arms during a storm. The thunder roars, the lightning flashes, but the child isn't afraid as long as they're held. The father can't stop the thunder, but he can provide safety through the storm. That's what it means to rest in God's control. You may still hear the thunder, you may still see the lightning, but fear doesn't take over because you know whose arms you're in. You stop trying to calm the storm and instead let Him calm you. There's a peace that can't be explained, only experienced, when you believe that your life is not random, that your pain is not wasted, that your path is being directed by divine wisdom. The enemy thrives in confusion. He wants you to believe that your situation is out of control so that panic can take over your faith. But the truth is, even when life feels chaotic, heaven is calm. God doesn't panic when you panic. He doesn't rush when you're in a hurry. He moves according to purpose, not pressure. The greatest battles of faith aren't fought in the external world, they're fought in the mind. Fear screams that everything is falling apart. Faith whispers that everything is falling into place. Fear focuses on what's visible, faith focuses on what's promised. Fear tells you that you're alone, faith reminds you that God is with you. Every time you choose faith over fear, peace begins to take root deeper and deeper in your spirit. You start realizing that what happens around you doesn't have to control what happens within you. You can't stop the storm, but you can stop it from getting inside your heart. When you walk through life believing that God is in control, you begin to carry peace into every situation. People around you start to notice. You react differently to pressure. You speak differently in crisis. You have a steadiness that doesn't come from circumstances, but from confidence in the one who controls them. Believing God is in control doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you get stronger. You begin to develop spiritual muscles that hold you up when everything else collapses. The same wind that once knocked you down begins to lift you higher. You start seeing trials as training, not punishment. You start viewing delays as preparation, not denial. You stop asking, why me? And start saying, God, what are you showing me? That's the shift from panic to peace, from fear to faith. The closer you walk with God, the less you need to know the details because you trust His direction. You stop needing explanations because you trust His heart. You realize that sometimes He leads you into the storm just to show you that He can calm it. Sometimes He allows the fire not to burn you, but to refine you. Sometimes He allows the test not to crush you, but to reveal the strength you didn't know you had. The world around you may say, look at the facts. But faith says, look at the Father. The facts might tell you that things are impossible, but the Father reminds you that all things are possible. The facts may show you what's broken, but the Father shows you what's being built. The facts may make you afraid, but the Father invites you to trust. When you truly believe He's in control, you stop trying to predict how things will work out and start declaring that they will. You begin to live from a place of assurance instead of anxiety. The same energy you once spent worrying becomes energy spent worshiping. You begin to wake up each morning and say, I don't know what today holds, but I know who holds it. That kind of faith confuses the enemy because he can't shake someone whose peace doesn't depend on circumstances. Even in moments when it feels like God is silent, He's still sovereign. His silence doesn't mean He's absent. It means He's working in ways you can't yet see. The hands of God move quietly, but they move powerfully. He never stops working, even when you can't feel it. That's why peace isn't based on visible results, but on invisible reality. Peace doesn't wait for the outcome. It exists because of the overcomer. When you understand that you can sit in the middle of a storm and still be calm, you can walk through a valley and still have joy. You can face uncertainty with confidence because you know that no matter what happens, your God reigns. When you believe He's in control, you don't need to see the whole picture. You just need to trust the painter. You stop asking Him to explain and start asking Him to sustain. You rest in His promise that He is working all things together for good to those who love Him. And that truth alone is enough to quiet every fear, silence every doubt, and bring peace to even the most restless heart. God's delays are not denials. His timing is perfect even when it feels painful. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept when you're walking by faith, because everything in you wants to see results now. You pray, you believe, you wait, and still nothing seems to change. You look around and see others receiving what you've been praying for, and you start to wonder if maybe God skipped over you. But He hasn't forgotten you. His silence is not neglect, and His timing is never wrong. When God delays, it's not because He's withholding good from you. It's because He's preparing something greater than you could imagine. Every delay has purpose. Every pause has meaning. Every waiting season is a seedbed for a miracle that hasn't yet broken through the soil. It's easy to trust God when everything is moving according to your schedule, but true faith is proven when you keep trusting Him in the waiting. When the clock keeps ticking and heaven seems quiet, there's something about delay that refines your faith. It strips away the illusion that you can control outcomes. It exposes the difference between believing in God's power and trusting His plan. You can believe that God can do something and still be frustrated by when He chooses to do it. But the deeper your faith grows, the more you realize that timing is as holy as the miracle itself. If the blessing came too early, you might not be ready to handle it. If the door opened before you were mature enough to walk through it, what was meant to bless you might have broken you. Sometimes God delays because He's protecting you from premature success that could become your downfall. The delay is not a punishment, it's a preparation. He's building patience, humility, wisdom, and endurance in the waiting, shaping your heart to match the promise He's about to release. And though the delay may feel like silence, it's actually the sound of construction in heaven. In every delay, God is weaving threads that you can't yet see. You're looking at your life through a small window, but he sees the entire landscape. What feels like stillness to you is strategy to him. Think of Joseph in prison after being betrayed by his brothers. Years passed without any visible change. But behind the scenes, God was aligning events, preparing the moment when Joseph would move from the prison to the palace. If Joseph had been released a year earlier, he would have missed Pharaoh's dream. If he had been released a year later, Egypt might have perished in famine. The timing was divine. God's delays placed Joseph in position for destiny. That's how God works, not randomly, but precisely. And when you understand that, you begin to see that delay is not a sign that God has forgotten. It's evidence that he's organizing something bigger than your understanding. Waiting is not wasted when your hope is anchored in God. Every day of waiting builds a deeper trust, a sturdier faith, a stronger relationship. Waiting forces you to lean not on your own understanding, but on his wisdom. It teaches you to pray differently, not for faster answers, but for greater patience. It transforms your prayers from God, do it now, to God, do it right. It's in the waiting that you learn to surrender your will for his. It's in the waiting that you discover the difference between desire and destiny. And even though your heartache is and your patience wears thin, the spirit inside you whispers, hold on, God is not done, because he never delays without purpose. When it seems like nothing is happening, he's working on the details you can't see. He's softening hearts, opening doors, aligning people, and positioning resources, all so that when the time is right, everything will unfold perfectly. One of the greatest challenges in faith is to keep walking when there's no visible progress. You pray, you obey, and still it feels like you're standing still. But sometimes God's greatest work happens in the seasons that look like nothing is moving. He's working beneath the surface, and when the breakthrough comes, it will seem sudden, but it's been in motion all along. Think about how long David waited between being anointed and being appointed. Years passed before he became king, and those years weren't wasted. They were years of shaping, testing, and refining. God used lions, bears, and giants to train him for the throne. What looked like delay was actually divine development. God's timing is not about convenience. It's about completion. He won't release you into the promise until what he started in you is ready to sustain it. When life slows down and prayers seem unanswered, the enemy loves to whisper that God doesn't care. He wants to sow seeds of doubt in your spirit to convince you that the delay means denial. But the truth is, the delay is where your faith matures. It's in those quiet seasons that you learn to walk by faith and not by sight. You learn to trust that even when the visible world looks barren, the invisible one is bursting with activity. You can't see the roots growing beneath the soil, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. God is strengthening your foundation so that when the fruit appears, it won't collapse under pressure. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize why he made you wait. You'll see how his timing was the only way for things to truly work out for your good. God's delays also protect you from disappointment that could destroy your spirit. Sometimes we're so focused on what we want that we can't see what's best. If God gave you everything you asked for when you wanted it, you might have settled for less than his best. The delay keeps you aligned with his purpose. It redirects your heart away from temporary desires toward eternal value. The wait doesn't just prepare the blessing, it prepares you. And when you're ready, what once felt delayed will suddenly feel right on time. You'll realize that what you thought was lost time was actually invested time, time that grew your faith, deepened your trust, and shaped your character into the image of Christ. There's beauty in learning to wait without worry. It's not a passive waiting, but an active trust. You wake up each day with expectancy, knowing that at any moment, God could turn it all around. You don't stop believing because of the delay. You let the delay refine your belief. You keep planting seeds of faith through prayer, praise, and obedience, even when you can't see the harvest yet. Because faith doesn't need proof to keep walking. It only needs a promise. And when you carry that promise in your heart, you can walk through waiting seasons with confidence that God's clock never runs late. The delay is not about God withholding. It's about him unfolding. He's weaving your story in such a way that every chapter will fit perfectly into his greater plan. When the answer finally arrives, you'll see how every closed door, every setback, every moment of waiting was a stepping stone to the miracle. You'll understand that the delay didn't deny you. It defined you. It taught you that his ways are higher, his timing wiser, and his promises surer than anything this world can offer. You'll look back on the waiting and realize it was never a waste. It was the very thing that prepared you for the blessing that was always meant to come. What looks like rejection is often divine redirection towards something greater. Every one of us has faced moments when doors close we thought would open, when people we counted on walk away, when opportunities we prayed for vanish before our eyes. It's in those moments that rejection cuts the deepest. You begin to question your worth, your calling, even God's plan. You replay every moment in your head, wondering what you could have done differently, why things didn't work out, why the answer was no, when your heart was pleading for yes. But what feels like rejection to you is often God's gentle way of turning your steps in a direction you never would have chosen on your own. He's not punishing you, he's protecting you. He's not ignoring your prayer, he's improving your outcome. You see, when God says no, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something better that you can't see yet. Sometimes God closes a door because you were about to settle for less than what he planned. The job that didn't work out, the relationship that fell apart, the dream that collapsed, all of those could have been traps disguised as blessings. You think you know what's best for you, but God sees the future you can't. He knows that what looks right now might destroy you later. He knows the motives of hearts you can't discern. He knows where each road leads, and when he redirects you, it's never out of cruelty, it's out of love. The same hand that closes one door will eventually open another. And when it does, you'll understand why he had to protect you from what you thought you wanted. The rejection you cried over might be the very thing that saved you from disaster. The disappointment you didn't understand might be the detour that leads to destiny. Rejection hurts because it feels personal. It feels like you weren't enough, like you failed, like you've been left behind. But in the kingdom of God, rejection is often redirection in disguise. The people who walked out of your life weren't meant to go where you're going. The opportunities that slipped away weren't aligned with the purpose God has for you. Sometimes he allows people to reject you so you'll stop depending on their approval. He removes what's temporary so you can cling to what's eternal. When you're too focused on what you lost, you miss what he's trying to bring into your life. You have to learn to thank God, not only for open doors, but also for closed ones. You have to believe that if he didn't allow it, it wasn't meant for you. And if he removed it, it's because he's replacing it with something beyond your imagination. There's a powerful truth hidden in every disappointment. God is more interested in your destiny than in your comfort. Rejection shakes you out of what's familiar. It pushes you to grow. It forces you to step out of what you've outgrown. It challenges you to find your identity, not in what you have, but in who you belong to. When life turns in a direction you didn't expect, it's often because God is positioning you for purpose. Think about Joseph, rejected by his brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned for something he didn't do. It looked like rejection after rejection, loss after loss. But every step was redirection. God was guiding him toward the palace, toward leadership, toward saving his family and an entire nation. What looked like betrayal was actually preparation. The same God who did it for Joseph is doing it for you. He's not finished. You're in the middle of a story that will make sense later. Rejection also reveals your true source. As long as you depend on people to validate you, their rejection will crush you. But when your validation comes from God, no human rejection can derail you. He didn't create you for the approval of man, but for the purpose of heaven. When you know who you are in him, rejection loses its sting. You stop chasing people who walked away. You stop mourning over doors that closed. You begin to rest in the truth that what's meant for you cannot be taken from you. God's plan doesn't need human permission to succeed. No one's decision can cancel his design for your life. Even when others overlook you, he sees you. Even when others say no, his yes still stands. That's the security of trusting divine redirection. Knowing that the author of your story doesn't need anyone else's ink to finish your chapter. Every detour has a purpose. Sometimes God changes your route not because the destination is wrong, but because He's developing you along the way. You wanted a straight line from prayer to promise, but He takes you through valleys, deserts, and storms to prepare your heart for what's ahead. Rejection forces you to depend on Him more deeply. It strips away pride, builds resilience, and grows gratitude. When you finally arrive at what He has for you, you'll appreciate it more because of what you endured to get there. You'll realize that if you hadn't been rejected, you wouldn't have found your true path. If that door had opened, you might have missed the greater door He was saving for you. Sometimes God lets something break so He can build something stronger. Sometimes He removes someone you thought you needed so you can discover He's all you truly need. The hardest thing to do in moments of rejection is to trust that God knows what He's doing. Your heart screams for explanation, but God offers peace instead. You may not understand why things happened the way they did, but faith doesn't need full understanding to keep moving forward. Faith says, God, I don't get it, but I know you do. It says, even though this hurts, I believe you're using it. It says, I don't see the blessing now, but I know one day I will. That's how you turn rejection into redirection. By refusing to let pain define you and choosing instead to let purpose refine you. You lift your eyes from what ended to what's ahead. You trust that the same God who allowed this chapter to close already has the next one written. Rejection can also be God's way of building spiritual strength. When doors close, you're forced to rely on prayer more deeply. You learn to listen to His voice rather than the applause of others. You learn that peace doesn't come from being accepted, but from being aligned with His will. You begin to see setbacks not as failures, but as setups. What felt like loss becomes gain because it draws you closer to Him. That's the mystery of divine redirection. It hurts in the moment, but it heals in the long run. It breaks your pride, but builds your faith. It empties your hands so they can receive something greater. It silences your plans so you can hear His. Look back over your life and think of every moment you thought was rejection. The school you didn't get into, the person who left, the job you didn't land, the prayer that went unanswered. Now look where you are. Somehow you made it here. Somehow things still worked out, not in the way you expected, but in the way you needed. That's what God's redirection looks like. It's the invisible hand that turns what the enemy meant for harm into good. It's the wisdom that says no today to prepare you for a greater yes tomorrow. It's the love that allows pain because it's leading to purpose. And though rejection still stings, you can walk through it with confidence that your steps are ordered, your path is guided, and your future is still secure in His hands. Acting like everything works out is not pretending. It's trusting God's unseen hand at work. When life shakes beneath your feet and everything you planned begins to crumble, it's not about putting on a fake smile or pretending that everything is fine. Faith is not denial, it's defiance. It's standing in the middle of the storm and saying, I still trust Him. It's looking at what seems broken, delayed, and disappointing, yet knowing deep down that there is a divine hand orchestrating what your eyes cannot yet see. Acting like everything works out doesn't mean you ignore pain or silence your questions. It means you choose not to let your pain have the final word. It means you let your trust speak louder than your tears. It means you believe that even in the shadows, God's hand is still working, weaving every broken thread into something beautiful and eternal. Faith is not pretending the valley isn't dark. It's knowing the shepherd walks with you through it. There are moments when we are tempted to believe that God has forgotten us. We pray and hear nothing. We knock and no door opens. We wait and nothing changes. That's when the enemy whispers, you've been abandoned. But that's when faith must rise and say, no, I've been hidden, not forgotten. I'm being prepared, not punished. Acting like everything works out means you carry peace, even when the answer hasn't arrived. It's waking up every morning saying, God, I don't see it yet, but I trust you. It's continuing to love when you've been hurt, to give when you've been emptied, to serve when you feel unseen. The world calls that foolish, but heaven calls that faith. You act like everything works out not because it looks like it will, but because you know who holds it all together. God doesn't ask you to fake strength. He asks you to surrender control. He doesn't want you to act like you have it all figured out. He wants you to act like you know He does. The act of faith isn't about performance, it's about posture. It's about where you place your confidence when the outcome is uncertain. It's about walking forward when logic tells you to stop. Remember the blind man who cried out to Jesus when everyone told him to be quiet. He acted like healing was possible before he saw it. That's what trust looks like. It moves before the miracle. It believes before the evidence. It stands before the answer. You act like everything works out because your faith knows something your feelings don't yet understand. Sometimes God's unseen hand works through closed doors. Sometimes it works through delays that stretch you. Sometimes it works through heartbreak that humbles you. But in every situation, His hand is never absent. The same God who held the stars in their places still holds the details of your life. You don't have to see His fingerprints to know His hand is there. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, it looked like betrayal, but it was positioning. When he was sold into slavery, it looked like abandonment, but it was advancement. When he sat in prison, it looked like the end, but it was preparation. God's unseen hand was moving behind the curtain, and every step that looked like failure was actually leading to fulfillment. Acting like everything works out means you live with the quiet assurance that your story is being written by a faithful author who never wastes a chapter. There are times when the path will make no sense. You'll pray for deliverance, and instead you'll face delay. You'll ask for blessing, and instead you'll meet resistance. Yet, even then, trust doesn't waver, because faith sees differently. Faith doesn't measure God's goodness by present circumstances. It measures it by His eternal character. When the night is long, when the road feels endless, when you are tired of hoping, you still walk as if the morning is coming. Because faith always acts as if the promise is certain, even when the proof is missing. That's why acting like everything works out isn't hypocrisy. It's hope in action. It's declaring that what God promised, He will perform. God's unseen hand is often most active when you think He's doing nothing. Like a sculptor shaping marble, He chisels away the unnecessary parts of your life to reveal the beauty He sees. The process hurts, but the purpose is holy. Every unanswered prayer, every delay, every detour, He's shaping something in you that couldn't be formed through ease. When you act like everything works out, you align your heart with that process. You stop wrestling and start resting. You stop demanding proof and start offering praise. You learn to say, even here, I trust you, because the same God who calmed the storm can use the storm to calm your heart. Think about a seed buried underground. It's surrounded by darkness. It's pressed by the weight of the soil. If the seed could speak, it might say, everything around me feels like death. But in reality, that dark place is where growth begins. That's how God works in the unseen. You may feel buried, but you're actually being planted. And soon, what's been hidden will begin to rise. Acting like everything works out means you live from that truth. You speak life over what looks dead. You choose gratitude instead of grumbling. You walk in expectation, not despair, because you trust that even in silence, God is speaking through circumstances you can't yet understand. The people around you may not understand your faith. They might see you smiling in a storm and think you're pretending, but you're not pretending, you're proclaiming. You're declaring that no matter what, God is faithful. When you keep walking in faith, you're testifying that His promises are greater than your pain. Acting like everything works out is not about ignoring reality. It's about recognizing a higher reality. It's about seeing through the lens of eternity, knowing that even if you don't understand it now, one day you will. It's about living with a confidence that rests not on outcomes, but on the unchanging nature of God. Sometimes faith is just showing up when you feel like staying down. It's praying again when you've prayed 1,000 times. It's forgiving again when it still hurts. It's choosing joy when sorrow lingers. It's whispering, God, I trust you, when nothing makes sense. Every time you do that, you're acting like everything works out because you're putting your trust in the one who holds the outcome. You may not see the full picture yet, but you know the painter. You may not understand the route, but you trust the guide. You may not control the storm, but you know the one who commands the wind and waves. There is power in how you act when you don't yet see. Heaven moves when faith is displayed in dark seasons. The enemy trembles when you keep walking by faith. because he knows that trust in God is unshakable armor. Acting like everything works out isn't performance, it's perseverance. It's standing still when you could run. It's believing when you could break. It's knowing that even in chaos, your peace is not negotiable because it doesn't come from circumstance, it comes from Christ. And though you may not see his hand, you will feel his presence guiding you through every unknown valley, every storm, setback, and silence has a purpose when your life rests in God's control. There is not a single tear that falls from your eyes, not a single sigh that escapes your heart that heaven overlooks. When your life is surrendered to God, nothing is wasted. Not the pain, not the loss, not even the confusion that seems to follow you through seasons of darkness. The storms that frighten you are often the very tools God uses to strengthen your faith. The setbacks that leave you discouraged are the classrooms in which God teaches you trust. The silence that feels unbearable is often the moment when God is speaking the loudest through stillness. When you understand that God is in control, you begin to see that purpose is not lost in pain, it's hidden within it. We all go through storms. They come without warning and leave you standing in the wreckage of plans you thought were secure. Sometimes it's a broken relationship, a dream that crumbles, a loss that cuts so deep it takes your breath away. And in those moments, your heart cries, why? You wonder why God allowed it, why he didn't stop it, why he seems silent while your soul feels crushed. But what if that storm wasn't meant to destroy you, but to develop you? What if it was sent not to break your faith, but to prove it real? Storms have a way of showing you where your trust truly lies. When everything is calm, it's easy to say, God is good. But when the winds rage and the night grows long, that's when faith becomes more than words. It becomes your anchor. There are times when the setback you're facing isn't punishment, it's protection. You thought you were ready for that opportunity, that relationship, that door to open, but God knew the weight it carried would crush you before you were prepared to handle it. So he closed it. And because he loves you, he allowed the delay. Setbacks are often setups in disguise. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, thinking they were ending his future, but God was positioning him to save a nation. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every moment of waiting was a thread in the divine plan. What others meant for evil, God used for good. That's what it means to rest in God's control, to understand that no moment of your life is random or wasted. Every detour is divine. Every delay is deliberate. Every disappointment is part of a design you can't yet see. The silence of God can be the hardest thing to endure. You pray and nothing changes. You ask and the heavens seem shut. You wait for direction, and the only response is stillness. But even silence has purpose. In silence, God matures your faith. He strips away the need for constant reassurance and teaches you to walk by trust, not by signs. The silence of God is not his absence. It's his invitation for you to believe beyond what your senses can detect. He's saying, will you trust me even when I'm quiet? When you learn to rest in his silence, you begin to understand that his presence is not defined by his activity. He is working even when he's not speaking. Every storm has an expiration date, but every lesson it brings has eternal value. Sometimes God will calm the storm around you, but sometimes he calms you while the storm still rages. The purpose of your trial is not always to change your situation, it's to transform you. When your heart is anchored in God's control, you stop asking for easy seasons and start asking for enduring faith. You realize that strength is born in struggle, that wisdom is shaped through waiting, and that spiritual maturity grows best in the soil of adversity. God never promised a life without storms, but he did promise that he would never leave you in them. He walks with you even when the road is rough. He carries you when you can't take another step. He holds your hand through every valley of uncertainty. It's easy to look at others and think they have it easier, that their path is smoother, their blessings greater. But you don't see the storms they've survived, the nights they cried out in silence, the faith it took to keep walking. Every believer has a story of storms that shaped them. And when your life rests in God's hands, even the hardest chapters serve a purpose. The pain that once broke you becomes the platform for your testimony. The wound that once bled now becomes the scar that speaks of healing. What once looked like the end becomes the evidence that God was never done working. Resting in God's control doesn't mean you won't feel the wind. It means you won't let it move you off His promise. It means when life knocks you down, you rise again, not in your own strength, but in His. It means you stop fighting to understand and start choosing to trust. You realize that control was never yours to begin with. You can't control who stays or who leaves, what doors open or close, but you can control your surrender. And when your heart is fully surrendered to God, everything that touches your life must pass through His hands first. That's the peace of trust, knowing you're not the victim of chance, but the vessel of purpose. Even your past mistakes have purpose in God's control. The enemy loves to whisper that you've gone too far, that you've ruined what God planned, that your failures have disqualified you. But the truth is, God already knew every wrong turn you'd make before you took it, and He still chose you. He uses even your failures to redirect you toward His destiny. The things you regret most can become the very things God redeems most beautifully. When your life rests in His control, your past no longer defines you, it refines you. He takes what the enemy meant for shame and turns it into a story of grace. There will be moments when it feels like you've lost everything. The storm will strip away your comfort, your plans, maybe even people you thought you couldn't live without. But God never allows loss without preparing restoration. Sometimes He removes what's good so He can replace it with what's greater. Sometimes He breaks what's fragile to rebuild what's firm. When everything around you feels like it's falling apart, God is often aligning everything to fall into place. You may not see it now, but the purpose is unfolding behind the scenes. That's why faith must walk ahead of understanding. There's something powerful that happens when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What are you teaching me, Lord?" That's when the storm becomes your school. That's when the setback becomes your stage. That's when the silence becomes your sanctuary. You begin to see that your pain is not punishment, it's preparation. You begin to understand that every battle you face has already been filtered through the wisdom of God. Nothing touches you that hasn't first passed through His permission. And if He allowed it, it's because He plans to use it. Every storm, every setback, every silence carries a lesson, a shaping, a refining of who you are becoming in Him. The fire you're walking through today will become the light that guides others tomorrow. The tears you shed in private will become the testimony you share in public. What you thought would destroy you will one day define you as someone who stood firm because you knew who controlled the wind and the waves. When your life rests in God's control, you live differently. You endure differently. You love differently. You forgive differently. Because you know nothing is wasted. Even in your darkest hour, heaven is still orchestrating redemption. Even when everything looks uncertain, God's plan is certain. And though storms may shake the world around you, His purpose stands unshaken, turning every trial into testimony, every silence into strength, and every setback into a setup for the glory that is still to come.